New Hope, we have an exciting service for you today. We are going to be celebrating communion at the end of this service, or at the end of the message portion of this service. And I would just like to encourage you, if you don't have it already, go and get some elements for communion. And typically in our context, we use grape juice and we use a matzah cracker, but you can use whatever you have, anything that you can put in a cup and something that you can take a bite of. And we are going to be doing that and partaking in something that has been going on for a little over 2,000 years since Jesus instituted it on the night before he was crucified, on the night before he was arrested and taken in and all of that. And so it is something that we will be unified with all of Christianity. And so I would go and get that. In fact, hit pause right now. Got it? All right, good deal. So go ahead and save those, set them to the side. You're going to receive directions on that. It is something that helps us remember with grateful hearts that Jesus died on the cross for our sins and that he is coming back to take us with him to heaven. And so we remember that, we proclaim that, it's all part of that. And so I would encourage you, be excited about that. That's coming. Additionally, another thing that I'd like to let you know, you are designed for relationship. You probably are feeling that more these days now with the isolation and the loneliness that sometimes accompanies this stay-at-home order. And with that in mind, and knowing that you are designed that way, I have been talking with some different people and we've come up with an idea of something that we can do to be in unity together even when we're apart. And here it is. This week, I'd like to encourage you, read John chapter 20 multiple times through. There's going to be a bunch of us doing it. And you can know that maybe even at the exact same time you're reading it, someone else is reading it. And next week's message is going to come out of John chapter 20. It's going to be about doubting Thomas. So let's together read about doubting Thomas. Additionally, another thing we can do together is we can serve our church together. And we can do that many ways. We can do that through writing letters to each other. We can do that through phone calls, Zoom calls, all of those different things. And something else that you can do is you can continue to give your tithes and offering faithfully. And I just want to thank those of you that are doing that and you're faithfully doing that. Many of you are, and it's really been a blessing. And so you can do that through the website, everettnewhope.org. You can do that through downloading our app. You can do that through the mail, just mailing it in. And you can do that at 9304 7th Avenue Southeast, Everett, Washington, 98208. So with all of that in mind and remembering that we are people that are designed for unity, let's look in at the account of Jesus interacting with the disciples in the upper room. He steps into their moment and they're afraid, they're stuck in there not knowing what to do next. They've just lost Jesus and they're waiting for they don't know what. So let's listen as Pastor Lane unpacks this for us.
Good morning, or good afternoon, depending on when you're watching this. Today, we are going to be looking at, again, part of the series of people who doubted, people who didn't understand, people who misunderstood, people who didn't believe, people who were kind of almost stubborn in their unbelief. And when we think about that, I believe that one of the things we need to remember is it is completely reasonable for the disciples. The first week it was the two on the road to Emmaus. Last week was Mary Magdalene, and now we're looking at the disciples as a group, the 11, after the group that is referred to as the 11, the disciples, and what their perspective was. And it's completely rational for them to not understand, for them to, as the two on the road to Emmaus said, we had hoped that he was the one. Mary Magdalene, who, think about her life and how Jesus stepped into her life and treated her with respect, stepped into her life and released her from the 7 demons, the impact of that, and how she in the garden, she still went to the garden for that last goodbye, that last act of honor and worship to him. And so when she sees him, he's the gardener. But she immediately responds to him, Rabboni, Rabbi, you're the one, you're here, how is this possible? And she tries to clutch at his feet and that whole scenario. Well, see, the reason for that, and the disciples are struggling with this as well, with a little bit of added problem for them, in that they're fearful of the Jewish leaders. But when you go to the cross, see, the cross is a death sentence, and they know that. And so when Jesus goes to the cross, when he foretold, when he used the term, we use it as a little, we sing a chorus, if I be lifted up, I will draw all men unto me. Jesus was referencing, my understanding of that, kind of the idea that's being referenced there, it was kind of a way of saying string them up. He was referencing the cross. He was not talking about if you just elevate me as a human, as a person and all that. No, he's talking specifically about the cross. And so he gets a little bit of pushback on that because you're the Messiah, and the Messiah is supposed to come and set up the kingdom of David again and kick out the Romans. And basically, in some ways, everybody who sees Jesus at that moment and recognizes him as the Messiah has a mission for him. They want the Jewish leaders to be kicked out. They want the Pharisees to be put in their place. They want the Sadducees to be kind of relegated to the point that they're supposed to be. The Romans are going to be kicked out. The throne of David is going to be in perpetuity now. They have all of these things that they have a mission for Jesus. This is, if you're the Messiah, this is what you've got to do. We had a hope. We had hoped that you had done these things. Now it's not the case. And so it's important to remember that doubt by itself is not a bad thing. Not understanding is not a bad thing. It's reasonable. When you're confronted with these kind of things, it is completely reasonable. And I would say, if you've never doubted, how do you believe? If you've never had to wrestle with something, how do you believe it? If you never had to wrestle with the idea Jesus is virgin born, raised from the dead, that's not normal. Well, if you've never wrestled with that, can it really be yours? And I understand, some people, you may recoil from that idea, but it's very real because everyone's faith has to be their faith. It has to be their understanding of Scripture. They're grabbing it. The impact of Jesus working in their lives, just as Jesus went to the 2 on the road to Emmaus, just as Jesus went to Mary, just as Jesus will in this story, we will see he appears to the disciples, and he continues for 40 days. He does that, and in each case, belief in him becomes real. It becomes a real thing here. So the 2 passages that we're going to be looking at is Luke chapter 24, verses 36 through 40, or through 41, and then in John 19. Let me just check that for a second, make sure that that's actually where. No, it's John 20. John 20:19. So here we go. So the 2 from the road to Emmaus. Then the 2 told them what had happened on the way and how Jesus was recognized by them when he broke bread. And I want to just remind you, we're going to be celebrating communion today as well. While they were still talking about this, Jesus himself stood among them and said to them, "Peace be with you." They were startled and frightened, thinking they saw a ghost. He said to them, "Why are you troubled, and why do doubts arise in your mind? Look at my hands. Look at my feet. It is I myself. Touch me and see. A ghost does not have flesh and bones, as you see I have. When he had said this, he showed them his hands and feet. And while they still did not believe, because of joy and amazement, he asked them, do you have anything to eat? I've had a long day. So they gave him some broiled fish. Now, one of the things I think is a critical thing here is the way Luke records this. There's a pattern and they were startled and frightened when Jesus when he appeared in the room. That's where they started out. They'd been discussing these issues. The people from the road to Emmaus were told they come in and they tell their story. So now they have the women that they did not believe. Apparently Jesus appeared to Simon in the interim time here, and now they have the people on the road to Emmaus and they're discussing it. This is what would be referred to in a very real way, a very new normal. This is challenging. How do you navigate that? How does that happen? What does it look like when we try to navigate this brand new normal, that death is not the final expression of life, that there is something beyond that, that there's the resurrected one. He was dead, and now he's not dead anymore. This is very definitely a very new normal. They didn't understand what Jesus had been trying to tell them. In John, it actually tells us that he opened their mind, he opened their eyes, their heart, he opened their understanding to understand, in order for them to be able to understand what he had told them before. And and he comes into their midst, and in this moment of coming into their midst, they're terrified. They are startled and frightened. That's like somebody jumping out from behind a door to scare you. That's what that is an expression of. And frightened is pretty obvious, because they think he's a ghost. Because dead people don't rise from the dead. Dead people are dead. They're put in tombs. That's what happens. And then it's hard for me to not see Jesus saying all this with just a little bit of a smile. He maybe is enjoying this a little bit. Why are you troubled, and do doubts rise in your mind? Because you're dead. This is something completely out of the ordinary. You're supposed to be dead, and here you are. So of course we're going to be nervous. The doors were locked. John tells us that the doors were locked because they feared the Jewish leaders. They didn't want them to rush in, and so they're already in this heightened state of discomfort and unease, and boom, Jesus is there. That's startling. It's completely reasonable to be frightened. Jesus takes them through, though. He takes them through this moment, and he says to them, look, here I am. Touch me. Feel me. I'm not a ghost. You reach for a ghost, and it's, there's nothing there. You reach for a resurrected body, and it's there. I'm not resurrected, but I'm indicating, there's flesh and bone there. And Jesus expresses to them, ghosts don't have flesh and bone. When he had shown them this, as here you can touch me, and then he reveals to them the wounds from the cross. Look, it is me. You all remember the cross. Look here. Here's these wounds. And in verse 41, there's a really, I think that this pattern of was started up here at the top. They're doubting in verse 37. They were startled and frightened. And then in verse 41, and while they still did not believe it, okay? And this is a lot to swallow. This is a lot to grab a hold of. While they still did not believe it because of joy and amazement. And I was talking with Pastor Jonah and Josh, and Josh talked about, the joy and amazement, the unbelief of opening a gift that is so far beyond what you thought it could be. At Christmas time, and you open this thing up, and you never even imagined that it could possibly be. That's the joy and amazement. And you look at it and you go, I don't believe it. How many times have you said something like that? I don't believe it. Maybe the Seahawks win the Super Bowl. I don't believe it. That's amazing. Jonah had a great one, which I loved this picture when he and Lisi and Josiah came to America. They basically flew nonstop with very little intervening from Madagascar to SeaTac Airport. And then they were picked up at SeaTac Airport. Now, when they get picked up at SeaTac Airport and they hit the freeway heading north to Everett, they are looking around wondering how all this can be real. How the freeways can be, 6 lanes across. How can this all be real? It's overwhelming. It's amazing. But they're right there in the middle of it. They're experiencing it. And I want you to notice this transition that goes from startled and frightened to joy and amazement. That was the difference. This is a really important thing, and I want you to understand that Jesus responds to us when we have doubt, when we have misunderstanding, Jesus reaches to us. And if you go back and you look at the two on the road to Emmaus, you look at Mary Magdalene. We're going to continue this, doubting Thomas, and we're going to roll on through this. One of the things that I really want you to remember is Jesus reaches out to you. When you have things that you don't understand, things that are troubling to you, just like with Mary, I think that one of the things that was an impact in her life was the fact that she had encountered Jesus previously in ways that were profound. And so she was able to trust him now in this completely new normal. What is it that is this all about? I don't know. I don't understand it. I don't get what this can be about. But it's a completely new thing, and Jesus reaches out to us. When we struggle, when we doubt, when we wrestle with these things, and when we don't understand, Jesus reaches to us. Jesus reaches to you. That's important. And as a lesson, how do we reach out to others? So today, I'm going to talk. We're going to close now. We're going to close with, we had the new normal. This is a radically new normal thing, and it's also the way that Jesus describes it. And if you read it and you kind of look at the flow of the way this is given to us, one of the things that we see is that he starts where we are. He leads us to where we need to be. He does it gently. He does it boldly, but he does it gently. And then, after we've gone through that whole process of dead people are dead, dead people are not alive, but now there's someone who's alive. So what does that mean? And he begins to explain what this means. He leads us to the impact of it. And I want to suggest to you that I just want to focus on two impacts. One is from on a personal level, and I mentioned it before. We go from being startled and frightened to joy and marveling. We're amazed. We go from anxiety to a peace that passes all understanding. We go from being we go from being alone to being part of this eternal family, the family of God, the fellowship of the blood bought. We make those transitions, and that's the first one. That's the first impact. The second impact is what Jesus expresses later on, and we're going to actually talk about it. The plan is to talk about this a bit later on as well. But we also go from go tell his disciples to go make disciples. And he begins to explain to them that this is the Father's purpose. This is why I have died, so that you have a message to tell. You have been redeemed, and you can tell people who need to be redeemed that they can be redeemed, that their sin can be paid for. Those are the two things, those are the two, I believe, major impacts of this message. That's where I want to focus, on those two things. And so today, as we're going to celebrate communion, and I don't know about you, this is the first time I've ever done this way. I've never done this in front of a screen or with not people, not the church body with me in this. But I think that this is significant because, first off, it reminds us. We are told, as often as we do this, remember. And what is it that we're supposed to remember? We're supposed to remember Jesus. Jesus, who lived a sinless life, went to the cross and died for us. He was in the tomb for 3 days. He was dead in the tomb. And then on Sunday, on that third day, he was resurrected. That's what this is for us. This is what this is about. Jesus said on the night that he was betrayed, we're told that he took the bread and he broke it and he said, "This is my body broken for you." Paul tells us that this is a representation of what he was about, what he was doing. This is a significant thing that is here, and it reminds us that bodily he died. He was here physically, and bodily he was hung on the cross. He was not there, he was there. He experienced it all for us. This is his body broken for us. And as we hold it, and if you have, it doesn't matter whether you're having bread or whether you're having a cracker, it could be a Ritz, okay? It could be, a wheat thin. It could be a chunk of brown bread. But this represents his body, okay? His body for us. And just as he told the disciples, touch me and see. Touch me, experience. Spirits don't have flesh and bone. I have flesh and bone. He went to the cross physically, he was in the tomb physically, and he was resurrected physically. And this represents that fact. And as often as we do it, we remember. We remember the impact for us and to us. So Jesus, as we hold this, we remember this is your body, broken for us. And we are grateful. God, we are grateful for all that you went through in order to pay the penalty for my sin. I am grateful, God. I thank you. As we eat this, let's remember. After supper, he took the cup, and in taking the cup, he said, "This is the blood of the new covenant, shed for you." And Jesus, at the very beginning, it was decided without the shedding of blood, there could be no remission of sin. Sin would hang on us unless the penalty was paid with blood. And it's no longer the blood of bulls and goats that has to be done on a regular basis. Jesus did it once for all. And the new normal that we have is that we don't earn redemption. We receive it. It is a gift, and it is something that should be joy and amazement to us. So as we drink this, and again, it could be. I have known people who, in the only safe drinking liquid that they could get, used Coca-Cola. They shared a Coke around the group. And the important part of it is, this is done in remembrance of Jesus, proclaiming this represents his blood. This represents him. It is I bring nothing to it. I bring nothing but my need to this. Jesus did this. He shed his blood for us. As we drink it, I want the impact of it, this new normal, to take root in our hearts. Let us be overwhelmed with joy and amazement. Let us marvel at what Jesus has done for us. And as we begin to do that, the peace that passes understanding is able to be in us as well. The message of redemption can flow. It can flow through us. It can impact those people around us that need to hear it, because we are overwhelmed with this. His blood shed for me. He did this for me. That should be a joy and amazement kind of thing. Jesus, we hold in our hands that which represents your blood shed for us, and we are grateful. And God, I ask you that in our lives, the joy and amazement would really be overwhelming to us, that the God that created the universe would die for us, would shed his blood in that horrific way for us. God, help us to remember that. And as we do this, God, as we drink this, let us drink remembrance, and let us be challenged to share what we have, to share the fact that sin can be forgiven, relationship can be had. God, help us with that. And I ask it in your name, Jesus. Amen. Thank you. Go in joy and amazement.